Hey guys, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. Welcome to round number 13 of the candidates match. The game of the day was played between Fabiano Caruana and Levon Aronian. Now Caruana had just lost to Sergei Karyakin before the rest day, so it kind of knocked him off of his high horse. And then Levon Aronian has been losing the whole entire tournament. So mentally, Aronian has checked out of this tournament. But he's still a competitor. He's still a professional, so he's going to fight to the very end. So let's go ahead and see what happened today in the game. Caruana was white, played e4, e5, knight f3, attacks the pawn, knight c6. And you have a Roy Lopez here. You know, white wants to remove the defender of that e-pawn there. You have a6, which is the Morphy defense. Bishop a4, knight f6, attacks the e-pawn. Castles. White's not worried about it because if black ever captures that pawn there, then he can just play rook e1 and he'll get the pawn back. Bishop e7, rook e1, b5 hits the bishop, bishop b3, castles. And right here you saw a different variation than the main line. Fabi played d3 right here, which is a different move than the book move. The book move here is c3 with the idea of playing d4 very soon and challenging the center so he can establish a classical pawn center. But instead, Fabi played d3 here, which is a pretty solid line. It's a little less ambitious because this line here avoids the Marshall Gambit. And Levon Aronian is an specialist. He's an expert in the Marshall Gambit. So Fabi is clearly playing with the mindset of not losing going into the very last round. He understands, you know, the position that he's in the tournament. So he plays this d3 line here, d6, bishop d2. This here stops the knight from doing its usual maneuver. Usually the knight likes to swing over here to a5, and then black plays c5 here, expanding on the queen side. Black likes to play on the queen side in these type of Ruy Lopez positions, whereas white will play over here on the king side. You have bishop g4, c3, with the idea of expanding in the center very soon. d5, Aronian strikes first in the center with c5. He did use two tempos, though, to move his d-pawn. h3 puts the question to the bishop. Bishop drops back to h5. Queen e2. Rook b8. Now you have bishop g5. D takes e. So now you have a different pawn structure here. Now the center is open. You have a open d file here for the players to play along. h6. And bishop c1 is the best place for the bishop to retreat to. There's really no other good squares for the bishop to retreat to. Bishop g6. Now black has two attackers on the e-pawn. Knight b d2. And now the knight is getting ready to make his usual maneuvers. Right now, it's currently protecting this e-pawn right here. But it is going to make a little maneuver. Usually the knight will come to f1 and then be rerouted to either e3 or g3 with the idea of then being rerouted to either f5 or h5, putting pressure on this g7 square. Knight h5. Black has his own ideas of what he wants to do with his knight. He wants to get his knight into this f4 square and put pressure on the queen there, and also on this g2 square. Knight f1, bishop c5, g3. Aronian kind of forced Caruana to make a weakness in his king side. He had to move another pawn in front of his king, which is never good. But it does keep the knight out of this f4 square, which could do some damage once Aronian gets more pieces over there. King h7. This releases the f pawn from being pinned Now Aronian can play f5 if he chooses. King g2, queen e7, bishop c2. Now Aronian is utilizing that open d file. b4 hits the bishop drops back to b6, and a4. And I just wanted to stop right here because I noticed that Fabiano is not just playing on the king side. A lot of times in these Ruy Lopez games, white will stick to his strategy of playing on the king side, whereas black will stick to his strategy of playing on the queen side and in the center. And in this game, Fabiano is trying to cover, the whole entire board. He's making sure that he dots all of his I's and crosses all of his T's. He is making sure that he's not in any predicament of losing this game and throwing away his chances of not being the winner of the candidates. Knight f6. Now this game here is becoming very tactical. Now Fabiano can go for a tactical line here. If he plays a takes b, queen takes. Now you have bishop takes f2. Now you have the knight in pre, and now you have the rook here in pre. Queen takes knight, bishop takes rook, knight takes the bishop. And at the end of this, white has won 2 pieces for giving up his rook. So in the press conference, Fabiano said that playing this variation was still very complicated going forward, and he wasn't exactly sure how to continue from here and if it was going to be to his benefit. So he didn't choose this line here. In his mind, he saw a different line that was a little bit more simpler for him to get to wrap his brain around, so to speak. So let's go back and see what he played in the game. In the game, he played knight h4, which is more of a positional move here. Like he's kind of putting the squeeze on black because black has less space. So he declined that tactical excursion there, and he's going more for a positional squeeze and stranglehold. He's still going to win a pawn on the queen side too. And that was also another reason why he preferred this method, because he didn't have to get so tactical, and he was still going to pick off the pawn here on the queen side. So queen e6. Now you have bishop d3. Again, attacking that pawn, the b5 pawn. He's going to win the b5 pawn for sure. Bishop h5, attacking the queen. And now this game is getting crazy, because now you have g4. Hits the bishop. What happens if Aronian retreats the bishop? If he goes back to g6, now you have knight takes bishop, f takes knight, a takes b, bishop takes, and then white is just a healthy pawn up. So Aronian might die a slow death in this variation here. And Aronian, like I said, he's a fighter. He's not just going to bow out easily. So instead of playing bishop g6 here, retreating the bishop, he actually sacks his bishop. Bishop takes g4. And then the pawn captures the bishop, knight captures the pawn, and you have a double attack on that f2 pawn there. And Fabi plays knight f5, allowing the f pawn to be captured. But with that, his knight is on a great outpost. His knight is hitting the g7 and a6 squares. Once Fabi can get more pieces to join in for the attack, his knight is very, very comfortable there. So, but he gives up the f2 pawn though, and Aronian accepts that. He takes it. Now he's got 2 attackers on the bishop, so he drops the bishop back. Now if we stop here and evaluate the position and see what just happened, black got 3 of white's kingside pawns for his bishop. So that is compensation. That's definitely compensation, because it's a weakness just to move your kingside pawns, let alone all 3 of them being captured. So white has no pawn cover anymore. So that's definitely compensation for that bishop. G6 hits the knight, and now there is another line here in the game. Fabi played knight 1 to E3, but there is another continuation. If he goes ahead and plays A5 here, which hits the bishop, this was the best way for Fabi to play. This was the best continuation right here. Bishop would drop back to A7, knight 1 to E3 now. Bishop captures, knight captures, and knight H3. And here white will keep his advantage. And you notice the pawn structure here on the king side for black. Everything is still closed. Everything is still closed here. So black is still having a tough time invading. Even though white doesn't have any pawn cover, he's going to have a tough time invading. So that was the best continuation for Fabi. But instead of playing that, Fabi played knight 1 to E3. And this here lets Aronian back in the game, actually. This the engine gave this position a dead draw, 0.00. So, and the reason behind that is because now he allows Aronian to capture the knight on F5 with the G-pawn. So now this whole G-file is going to be open for the black pieces to invade. So G takes F, E takes F, queen moves out the way, and you have the queen snapping off the knight there on F2. Now, Fabi did win another pawn in this combination here, in this variation, but like I said, that gives black the chance to get back in the game and draw the game now, because now Fabi's king is way more exposed here along this G file. And don't forget about this long range bishop here. So black definitely has chances here. So, and at this point here, there's a very strong move that black can play that will increase his chances of a draw or maybe even a win. Do you guys see what the correct move is? It's very, very strong. Pause the video. See if you can find it. I'm going to go ahead and play it now. It's knight takes B4. Wow. Yes, can you believe that? And it's a clearance sacrifice with the idea of the rook coming to D4. And once the rook gets on D4, it can wreak havoc all along the king side here with the combination of the bishop, this rook here coming to G8, the queen here. It's going to be trouble for Fabi to stay in the game. It's going to be one of those games where Fabi is going to have to find the correct move every single time. Or if he doesn't, he has a chance of losing the game. The king would go to H3. The rook comes over to G8. And like I said, there's only one saving move in all of these moves here that would keep Fabi in the game. And for this position here, the one move is actually giving up material. Knight D5 is the best move in this position here. And the reason why is because it will remove the rook from that fourth rank there, where it's just so dangerous. So let's go back. Aronian did not find that knight takes B4 move. And also Fabiano did not see that move either. In the press conference, they both admitted that they completely missed knight takes B4. So Aronian played E4 here because he wants to get his knight into the game and get more pieces over here to the queen side, to the king side, where Fabi is so exposed. But this is actually just a losing move here. Now Fabi is much better. He plays rook H1, and you can kind of see the pattern here, what's going on. Fabi's got his rook eyeing his H6 pawn. He's got the bishop long range indirectly eyeing this H6 pawn. And then if the knight can ever move and get to this G4 square, it's going to hit the queen. It's going to hit the queen, and it's going to hit this H6 square. So Fabi's got all of his pieces eyeing this H6 square. So rook D6 is an attempt to add some protection to this h6. Bishop takes e4 and another pawn falls. Now it's sending the knight as well. Rook g8 check. King goes back to f1. Knight e5. Queen f4. And c6. c6 is a prophylactic move that keeps the knight. It keeps his knight from jumping into this d5 square, which would fork the queen and the bishop here. A takes b. So what happens here if A takes b? If Aronian plays that, then you have rook captures on h6, check. And now queen takes rook, f6, check. And now if the knight blocks, then that just drops the rook there on d6. So that's a loss there for black. So he can't even block the check with the knight. He has to block the check with the rook. Now you have queen takes, king takes queen, so the queens come off the board. But then you have knight c4, discovered check on the king. King goes to h5. Now you have bishop takes g6, check. And then the knight snaps off the rook. So at the end of this, white is an entire rook up. This is a definite win for white. So that's why he can't snap off that pawn. Let's go back. He can't snap off that pawn there on b5. So instead, he plays rook g5 here, trying to add some interference for all these sacks here on h6. But then you have b takes a6, another pawn falls. The threats are just too great to defend on both sides of the board. Aronian can't stop all of these threats on the king side and then still protect all of his pawns on the queen side. It's just too much. So queen d8 here, threatening rook d1 check. f6, discovered check on the king. The knight g6 to block. Now you have rook h6. Rook captures pawn on h6 here. And Aronian resigns at this point. There's a number of ways to win for white. I'll show you a couple of ways. And I just wanted to say that Aronian has lost 6 out of the last 13 games that he's played. I don't know the statistics, but I am leaning towards this being one of Aronian's worst tournaments, professional tournaments ever. If anyone knows for sure, I would definitely like to know. But this seems like this is Aronian's worst tournament ever. It's horrible. Let me go ahead and show you how white can go ahead and win this game, finish him off if he didn't resign. If the king just doesn't capture and just avoids it, he could play g8. But then you have the queen snapping off the rook there, and he wins the rook. Rook takes f6, check. King goes to e1, and now there's nothing left for black to play for. He's down an entire rook, and he can just forget about the pawns on the queen side. These pawns here are going to queen. One of these pawns here is going to queen. This one here is already 2 squares away. So, and then it kind of looks like there's a trick here with a discovery. Like if black plays like rook f1 check. But the thing is, once white recaptures with the knight there, the queen is protected by the bishop. So the queen can't capture. So there's no tricks there. Let's go back here. That's if the king avoided capturing there. If the king does capture on h6, now you have queen h2 check. The rook blocks. Knight f5 check. It's a double check with the bishop and knight. King goes back to h7. Queen captures the rook. Now you have a number of ways to win here. White can simply just push the pawn, and he's going to either win the bishop because the bishop's going to have to sack, or he's going to get to win the queen because the queen is going to have to sack on a8. So that's one way he could win. Or he could play knight e7 here. Let's see what happens if he plays knight e7. Knight captures, queen a7 check, king f8. Queen H8 check. Knight blocks. Bishop A6 check. The king is running. Look, the queen just snapped off the knight now. King D7. Snag snapped off another pawn. And now if the king goes to C8, you have checkmate with Queen B7. And then if the queen blocks Queen E7, now you have Bishop F5 check. King moves over. Now the queen snaps off the queen. Rook D7. Bishop F4 check. And now you have Queen D7. Queen takes D7. So with that, I just want to say that Caruana is back in the lead. Clear first place with 1 round to go. Shaq Mommy, he won his game today. He beat Alexander Grischuk. So he's 1/2 point back, along with Sergey Karyakin, who drew today. And we can't forget about Ding Liren, because he is still in it. If he wins tomorrow and the stars align where I think Shaq Mommy draws, and there's some other combinations involved where, like, if Karyakin loses and Shaq Mommy loses and another player draws, there's a lot of different combinations. Ding Liren can still get into a tiebreak. So he's not out of it yet. So it's a 4-way race with 1 round to go. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.